A lonely boy accidentally freed a terrifying monster that had been hiding behind his bedroom wall for years after believing every one of her lies. The movie begins by introducing an 8-year-old boy named Peter, who lives with his parents, Mark and Carol, an overly protective couple who care deeply about their only child. One night, a week before Halloween, Peter is suddenly awakened while sleeping alone in his bedroom after hearing strange noises coming from inside the house, followed by the sound of the shed door outside creaking as the wind blows against it. As he tries to figure out where the noises are coming from, Peter senses that something is moving behind the wall of his bedroom. Curious, he knocks on the wall. To his surprise, something knocks back from the other side. Terrified, Peter immediately wakes his parents. However, when Carol checks the wall herself and knocks on it, there is no response at all. She assumes the sounds are simply coming from their old house, perhaps rats running through the walls or the wooden structure creaking with age, and tells Peter to go back to sleep.
This is an old house. Come to bed.
Peter's life is just as miserable at school as it is at home. Almost every day he becomes the target of Brian and his friends' relentless bullying. Around the same time, Peter's homeroom teacher falls ill, so their class is temporarily assigned to a substitute teacher named Miss Devine.
Students, this is Miss Devine.
Peter, recess is coming.
I look forward to getting to know each and every one of you.
During recess, Peter chooses to stay inside the classroom to avoid Brian and his gang. While sitting alone, a spider suddenly appears on his desk, startling him.
We're supposed to be at recess.
I don't like recess.
Fortunately, Miss Devine quickly helps remove the spider and throws it out the window.
Pick it up. We're going to take this to the window.
That evening during dinner, Peter tells his parents that he wants to celebrate Halloween like the other children by wearing a costume and going trick-or-treating around the neighborhood. As expected, Mark and Carol immediately refuse. Mark explains that several years before Peter was born, on Halloween night, a young girl who lived near the old house at the end of the street mysteriously disappeared while she was out trick-or-treating with her friends. Ever since that incident, they have never allowed Peter to celebrate Halloween. After hearing the story, Peter becomes frightened and begins to worry that the same thing might happen to him.
I want to dress up. I want to trick or treat.
Before you were born, the little girl that lived there, she vanished on Halloween. You know the old house down the end of the lane with the boarded windows? She went out trick-or-treating and she disappeared.
Still haunted by the story, Peter decides to sleep with a flashlight pointed directly at the wall beside his bed. Everything seems normal at first, until the mysterious noises suddenly return and wake him up once again. Peter immediately screams for his father, but just like before, Mark finds nothing unusual when he checks the wall in Peter's room.
I heard something again.
Peter, you know what? I bet it's rats.
Hoping to reassure his son, Mark takes Peter to the backyard shed to spread rat poison, explaining that the noises Peter has been hearing are most likely caused by rats running around inside the walls. As Peter looks at the small pellets of poison, he innocently remarks that they smell like cinnamon. Hearing that, Mark simply replies that not everything that seems sweet is actually good. After they finish spreading the rat poison, Mark tells Peter that sometimes people have to make difficult decisions in order to protect their family. The next day at school, Miss Devine gives the class a horror-themed drawing assignment. However, among all the monsters and witches drawn by the other students, Peter's drawing immediately catches her attention. Instead of drawing a scary creature, Peter draws himself sleeping alone in a dark bedroom with the words, "Help me," written across the picture. Seeing the drawing, Miss Devine begins to suspect that Peter is actually trying to send a message and silently ask for help. Unable to shake off her concern, she decides to visit Peter's house after school to make sure he's okay. When she arrives, Miss Devine shows the drawing to Carol and gently asks if something might be wrong at home. Carol immediately insists that Peter is perfectly fine and claims the drawing is nothing more than the product of his overactive imagination.
I did want to show you something.
Peter has an overactive imagination, which is all this picture.
Other children drew monsters and witches, but Peter...
After Miss Devine leaves, instead of asking Peter why he drew such a disturbing picture, Carol scolds him for making his teacher worry. She insists there is absolutely nothing to fear inside the house or in Peter's bedroom, and tells him that everything he's been experiencing exists only in his imagination. Peter actually wants to explain that the words, "help me," are not referring to himself, but to the mysterious girl behind the wall. However, not wanting to make the argument with his mother any worse, he lies and says it was simply a drawing he made for his school assignment. That night, the mysterious voice calls out to Peter once again from behind the wall. Unlike before, Peter is no longer terrified. Instead, he begins to believe the voice is real and finally gathers the courage to talk to it. During their conversation, Peter learns that the mysterious girl calls herself Sarah. The following day, Peter once again becomes the target of Brian's bullying. Jealous after Miss Devine praises Peter's drawing in class, Brian deliberately shoves him and destroys the pumpkin project Peter has been working on. That night, Peter tells Sarah everything that happened at school. After listening to his story, Sarah begins manipulating him, telling Peter that he shouldn't keep allowing himself to be bullied. She encourages him to fight back by pushing Brian down the school stairs. Innocent and trusting, Peter believes every word Sarah says. The next day after school, without thinking about the consequences, Peter does exactly what Sarah told him to do. He pushes Brian down the staircase, leaving Brian with a broken leg.
Make him afraid of you.
As a result of his actions, Peter is immediately expelled from school. Mark and Carol are both shocked, unable to understand how their son could do something so cruel, especially since Peter rarely socializes with anyone outside of school and has never been taught to solve problems through violence. Not long afterward, Carol tells Mark about the drawing with the words "help me" that Peter made at school. After hearing this, Mark immediately demands an explanation. Peter finally admits that the message came from a girl who has been talking to him from behind the wall in his bedroom. The confession instantly sends Mark into a furious rage. He insists that there is absolutely no one behind the walls of their house before punishing Peter by locking him inside a hidden basement concealed behind the refrigerator, a secret room whose existence Peter himself had never known until that moment.
I said, stand up, go.
Meanwhile, back at school, Miss Devine is once again warned by the principal not to interfere too much in Peter's family affairs. According to him, whatever is happening inside Peter's home is already beyond the school's responsibility. The principal also explains that Mark and Carol's overly protective behavior is not without reason. Several years before Peter was born on Halloween night, a young girl from their neighborhood mysteriously disappeared while she was out trick-or-treating. Ever since that incident, Peter's parents have become far more protective of their son. Instead of easing her concerns, the explanation only makes Miss Devine even more curious. She begins searching for information about the case online and discovers an old news article stating that at around 2:15 a.m. on Halloween night, a child abduction alert was issued after a young girl named Rebecca, who was dressed as Princess Leia, vanished without a trace. Even years later, Rebecca was never found. After learning about the case, Miss Devine becomes even more worried about Peter's safety. Determined to check on him once again, she visits Peter's house, this time pretending to return his math test because he received a good grade. Secretly, she also writes her phone number on the paper, hoping Peter will contact her if he ever needs help.
Honey, this is Miss Devine.
I have Peter's last math quiz. I thought you should have it.
Mark and Carol invite her inside, but from the moment she enters the house, Miss Devine senses that something feels terribly wrong. Carol quietly locks the front door while Mark walks in, carrying a hammer with fresh blood still covering his hand. When Miss Devine asks about the injury, Mark calmly explains that he accidentally cut himself on a nail while repairing the house.
You're bleeding.
Just doing some remodeling. Loose nail.
Noticing that Peter is nowhere to be seen, Miss Devine asks where he will continue his education now that he has been expelled. Mark explains that Peter will be homeschooled from now on because Carol used to be a teacher herself. He also refuses Miss Devine's request to see Peter, claiming that his son is being punished in his room. Before long, Carol realizes that Miss Devine did not come simply to return Peter's test paper, but because she suspects they have been abusing him. Feeling offended, Carol angrily throws Miss Devine out of the house. During the commotion, Miss Devine briefly hears loud banging noises coming from the kitchen, specifically from behind the refrigerator. What she doesn't realize is that Peter is trapped in the hidden basement, desperately pounding on the door and crying out for help. Unfortunately, his cries are drowned out by Carol's shouting and the loud washing machine, so Miss Devine leaves without realizing that Peter is actually imprisoned beneath the house.
Nick, Peter's a miracle.
No.
No, before I have Peter.
After Miss Devine leaves, Mark finally lets Peter out of the basement. As if nothing had happened, Carol tries to ease the tension by giving him pumpkin pie and helping him take a bath.
You won't be going back to school any longer. I'm gonna be your teacher.
We're very proud of you, Peter.
We love you.
And we forgive you.
Mark also tells Peter that they have forgiven him for everything. From that day on, Peter officially stops attending school and begins homeschooling under Carol's supervision.
Good night, Peter.
See you in the morning, son.
That night, Peter once again speaks to the mysterious voice behind the wall. This time, however, Sarah finally reveals who she really is. She claims to be Peter's older sister, who has been imprisoned by their parents for many years. Sarah continues convincing Peter that Mark and Carol are actually evil people, explaining that she has been waiting all this time for Peter to grow strong enough to help her escape. According to Sarah, only Peter is capable of moving the massive grandfather clock that blocks the secret door leading to the place where she has been imprisoned. Growing even more curious, Peter asks to see what Sarah looks like. Sarah tells him to peek through a tiny hole hidden behind the wallpaper. But the moment Peter leans closer, a single eye suddenly appears and stares back at him through the opening, leaving him completely terrified.
Scaring me. Mom and Dad are evil, Peter.
Who are you?
I'm your sister.
Peter tries to forget everything and goes back to sleep. Not long afterward, he dreams of hearing loud knocking on his bedroom door as it slowly creaks open by itself.
Mom? Mom?
Peter suddenly wakes up, breathing heavily, only to realize that Carol is holding him in her arms. When she gently asks what he dreamed about, Peter simply pretends that he can't remember anything. That night, Sarah reveals another dark secret that Mark and Carol have been hiding for years. According to her, several years before Peter was born, Rebecca knocked on their front door on Halloween night to ask for candy, just like the other children in the neighborhood. At that time, Sarah had not yet been imprisoned behind the wall, so she secretly asked Rebecca to help her escape from the house. But before Rebecca could help her, Mark and Carol suddenly appeared. Sarah claims that their parents murdered Rebecca to cover up her existence and make sure no one would ever discover the family's secret. Innocent and trusting, Peter immediately believes every word Sarah tells him. To prove that she is telling the truth, Sarah instructs Peter to dig up something buried in the backyard. Without the slightest suspicion, Peter secretly grabs a shovel and begins digging where Sarah tells him to. To his horror, he uncovers a human skull buried beneath the ground. Before he has a chance to examine it any further, Carol suddenly calls out for Peter while searching for him in the backyard. Peter quickly buries the hole again before she notices anything. When Carol asks what he's doing outside, Peter lies and says that since he's not allowed to celebrate Halloween, he thought it would be better to spend his time carving pumpkins in the backyard instead. Carol accepts the explanation without becoming suspicious. For Peter, however, discovering the skull is enough to convince him that everything Sarah has told him is true, completely erasing any remaining doubt he had about the mysterious voice behind the wall. Feeling that he has no one else to turn to, Peter finally calls Miss Devine using the phone number she secretly wrote on his math test. Speaking in a whisper while constantly looking around to make sure no one catches him, Peter begs Miss Devine to come and save him. However, the call is suddenly cut short when Carol catches him. A few moments later, Miss Devine calls back, but Carol answers the phone instead. Remaining perfectly calm, Carol tells her that Peter simply misses his teacher and is too shy to express himself properly.
Hello?
Miss Devine, I need your help.
Hello? So sorry to have bothered you. Peter was just telling me how dearly he misses his teacher.
After hanging up the phone, Carol drags Peter back to his room. She tells him how disappointed she is that he chose to ask a stranger for help, insisting that she and Mark have always loved him and never once harmed him. But while scolding Peter, Carol suddenly notices a tiny hole hidden behind the wallpaper in his bedroom. The moment she sees it, her expression changes completely as she panics and becomes hysterical.
No, it'll be your fault. What did he tell you?
That same night, Sarah manipulates Peter once again, telling him that after everything that has happened, Mark and Carol are now planning to kill both of them to ensure their family secret is never exposed. Her words terrify Peter even more. He quietly sneaks downstairs and tries to eavesdrop on his parents' conversation. Although he can barely hear what they're saying, Peter becomes even more convinced that they are hiding something.
You're awake, son. Tomorrow, you'll help me out in the garden.
The following day, Mark seems to be trying to repair his relationship with Peter. After coming home from work, he spends time with his son cleaning up the rotting pumpkins in the backyard.
Black rot, killing off the whole garden. We're gonna bury the pumpkins or all the healthy pumpkins will get infected.
At the same time, Brian and his brothers secretly watch Peter's house from a distance. Still holding a grudge, they plan to get revenge on Halloween night. Before long, Halloween finally arrives. While children all over the neighborhood put on costumes and go trick-or-treating from house to house, Peter remains at home having dinner with his parents. Several children stop by their house asking for candy, but Carol rudely chases them away. During dinner, Peter quietly sits there, absent-mindedly playing with his bowl of porridge without taking a single bite. Meanwhile, Mark and Carol continue eating until they gradually notice that something tastes different. The porridge tastes unusually delicious and carries a faint scent of cinnamon. At that very moment, Mark suddenly remembers the rat poison he showed Peter just a few days earlier. When he notices that the backyard shed door has been left wide open, Mark immediately turns toward Peter and demands to know what he has done. Innocently, Peter tells him that Sarah is his older sister and that Mark and Carol have been imprisoning and torturing her behind the walls of the house all these years. Hearing Peter's confession, Mark's face immediately turns pale. He quickly orders Carol to call emergency services, but it is already too late because Peter has secretly cut the house phone line beforehand. Moments later, the rat poison begins taking effect. Mark dies from the poisoning, while Carol, with only her final strength remaining, desperately warns Peter never to free Sarah from behind the wall, no matter what happens. Sadly, Peter has been completely manipulated by Sarah and ignores his mother's final warning. After taking the keys from his parents' bodies, he pushes over the massive grandfather clock that has been concealing a hidden door inside the house. The moment the small door swings open, Sarah finally emerges for the very first time. The instant Peter sees the horrifying appearance of the sister he has only known through a voice, he is overwhelmed with terror and instinctively runs back to his bedroom without looking back. Not long after Sarah escapes from behind the wall, Brian arrives at Peter's house with his brothers wearing animal masks, determined to get revenge after Peter pushed Brian down the stairs and broke his leg. Assuming the house is empty, they break in and begin smashing everything inside, while Peter can do nothing but hide in fear beneath his bed.
Hey, Peter!
Their rampage doesn't last long. The moment they discover Carol's body inside the house, they immediately panic. It is then that Sarah finally reveals her true nature, brutally slaughtering Brian and his brothers one by one.
Brian!
Once the house falls silent again, Sarah slowly walks into Peter's bedroom and sits on the bed while Peter remains hidden underneath it. There, Sarah begins telling Peter about her past. She claims that ever since she was born, her horrifying appearance made Mark and Carol unable to accept her as their daughter. When Peter was born, however, their parents gave him all the love and affection Sarah had never received. Sarah also says that she had been imprisoned since childhood and treated like a monster. Peter also remembers overhearing a conversation between Mark and Carol, during which they discussed the possibility of performing an exorcism because they believed something truly evil had lived inside Sarah ever since the day she was born. After spending years trapped in isolation, Sarah patiently waited for the opportunity to escape. She deliberately manipulated Peter into believing that Mark and Carol were evil, convincing him to open the secret door that had kept her imprisoned all these years. But the moment she finally gains her freedom, Sarah's true personality begins to emerge. Without the slightest hesitation, she drags Peter behind the wall and locks her own younger brother inside. Only then does Peter realize that Sarah has been using him all along simply to regain her freedom. At the same time, Miss Devine, who has suspected for a long time that something is terribly wrong with Peter's family, finally gathers the courage to return to the house. As soon as she arrives, she is horrified to find the place completely trashed.
Peter?
Before she can even process what is happening, Sarah suddenly attacks her, leaving deep scratches across her leg. From behind the wall, Peter desperately screams at Miss Devine to run away.
Miss Devine, run!
Peter?
But unwilling to abandon her student, she follows his voice until she finally discovers Peter trapped behind the wall and begins trying to free him. Meanwhile, Sarah crawls throughout the house like a spider, relentlessly hunting them down. Fortunately, Miss Devine manages to slow Sarah down by slamming Peter's bedroom door shut. However, Sarah soon enters through the secret passage that Peter had previously opened after knocking over the massive grandfather clock and resumes chasing him. After Miss Devine finally breaks through the wall imprisoning Peter, the two of them immediately try to escape the house. Sadly, before they can make it outside, Sarah captures Peter once again and drags him into a deep pit located beneath the basement. At the bottom of the pit, Peter discovers an old doll with Sarah's name written on it. From this discovery, it becomes clear that before she was imprisoned behind the wall, Sarah had once been locked inside that very pit. Moments later, Sarah slowly crawls down and reveals that throughout her entire life, she never received love or affection from her parents. According to Sarah, she was hated, isolated from the outside world, and imprisoned for years until the hatred growing inside her gradually transformed her into the terrifying monster she has become. Fortunately, Miss Devine arrives just in time to save Peter. Although Sarah moves incredibly fast like a spider, her long hair accidentally hangs all the way down into the bottom of the pit. Peter immediately takes advantage of the opportunity by climbing up while holding tightly onto Sarah's hair. As Peter continues pulling on it, Sarah is unable to freely attack Miss Devine. Even after reaching the top, Peter keeps pulling on Sarah's hair with all his strength, preventing her from moving. Taking advantage of the moment, Miss Devine works together with Peter and repeatedly strikes Sarah until she finally falls back into the bottom of the pit. Without wasting a second, Peter quickly closes the heavy iron hatch that had once been used to imprison Sarah and locks it tightly, trapping her inside once again. Even from behind the locked hatch, Sarah stares at Peter and tells him that the blood of a murderer now flows through his veins as well. Peter has killed his own mother and father, which means he has become just like her. It is only after Sarah's final words that all of her lies are finally exposed. Throughout the story, Peter believed that Rebecca had been murdered by Mark and Carol. In reality, the opposite is true. Rebecca was actually murdered by Sarah herself during her first attempt to escape on Halloween night. Realizing that their firstborn daughter was truly dangerous, Mark and Carol secretly buried Rebecca's body in the backyard to prevent anyone from discovering Sarah's existence. After that incident, Sarah was moved from the underground pit to the hidden chamber behind the wall, where she was kept under much tighter confinement. They even blocked the secret entrance with a massive grandfather clock to ensure she would never escape again. That is why Sarah waited until Peter was old enough and strong enough to move the clock and set her free. After the horrifying events finally come to an end, Peter, now left without his parents, is taken in by Miss Devine and begins a new life under her care. However, even though he manages to escape the House of Horrors, Peter never truly escapes Sarah. From that night on, every time he lies down to sleep, he is haunted by overwhelming fear. Moving shadows in the corners of his room, the creaking of the house, knocks coming from inside the walls, and even long strands of hair suddenly hanging in front of him constantly remind him of his sister. There are even moments when Peter believes he sees Sarah standing silently right behind him. Although everything Peter experiences is nothing more than hallucinations caused by the deep psychological trauma he has suffered, to Peter, the terror feels completely real, and with that, the story comes to an end.